Good morning. When Nick introduced me last night, he introduced me as his former boss because he used to be our worship director at Crosspoint Community Church in Katy, Texas, a church that my family and I founded and led for almost 20 years, where Nick also, however, met my daughter. So I'm also his father-in-law. So those of you who are father-in-laws, you know at times you really do wish you were their boss, right? So you could just say to that son-in-law, here's what you need to do. On one of my recent trips to Phoenix, I was in an Uber, which I typically do when I come and visit my family here, or we work with churches here in the Valley. My driver's name was Peter. It was his real name. And at some point in the drive, pretty early on, Peter realized I was a pastor, and so he began to tell me about his journey from Islam to Christianity. He grew up in a strict Muslim home where grace didn't exist. But a few years ago, his older brother had converted to Christianity through his wife. This cut Peter's brother off from the family. They ostracized him, but Peter and his brother were very close, and so Peter kept that relationship going. And one day, Peter's brother suggested that Peter should read about Jesus, especially the New Testament stories about Jesus. And when Peter did, he told me he fell in love with Christianity, which is one of the huge outcomes we want to see in this ministry that I lead. I lead a ministry that helps churches be more effective in reaching their communities. And I get to do that in large part because Pastor Nate helped me start that ministry almost 15 years ago. Nate and I were friends. We've been friends since about 2003. We were both church planters, and planting churches is a young man's job. It's a very difficult task. And so we started that church, or that network called 5-2, because we know that one of the most effective ways of reaching new people is through new things, be they new churches, new ministries, new initiatives coming out of a church. That's why we created it. And we called this network 5-2 because when you and I go to start new things, the biggest thing that we're faced with and we doubt is, do we have the resources to do what God wants us to do? We look at this huge task in front of us and we go, we don't have enough money or people, whatever it may be. And we took our name then, 5 loaves, 2 fish, 5-2, from the feeding of the 5,000, because when the disciples were faced with having to feed this huge crowd of 5,000 plus people, and they felt they didn't have enough, they went and borrowed the food of the little boy and brought it back to Jesus, and Jesus showed them how he multiplies resources. He multiplied those 5 loaves and 2 fish so much that after everybody had their fill, there was still a basket full left over for each disciple to take back home. So whether you are looking to act on your calling and starting something new for the sake of the kingdom, or you have a church that wants to grow by reaching new people through new initiatives, that's why 5-2 exists, so that Jesus' church would grow. I would think you would agree with me that the pandemic changed people. We literally changed. We now value things we didn't value before. The priority moved around in our lives. And so if churches are going to reach new people, they've got to figure out how they're going to change. Well, when Peter told me he fell in love with Christianity, I asked him, so what was it about Christianity that just drew you in? And he said it was the sheer love of God in Jesus. He said he couldn't escape it. He said in Islam, man is God's servant. But Jesus said that we are his friends. He said that's just huge. And so Peter followed in his brother's footsteps, and he too became a Christian, and he too was ostracized by his family. But just about 3 weeks before my Uber ride, he said his father had reached out to him and said, I don't want to lose sons over a religious issue. I welcome you back into our family. And when I listened to Peter's story, I heard a number of things. I heard of a young man who was struggling, and he was just wondering what life was all about. We've all been there. I heard a young man who loved his brother and his father incredibly and was devastated over this divide that Christianity, this man named Jesus, had caused in his family. I heard a young man who at first couldn't believe God loved him like Jesus said, and finally couldn't resist that love. The love was so magnetic and attractive, he couldn't ignore it. He was like a kid in Buckeye in summer who discovered an all-you-can-eat-for-free snow cone shop. And I heard how Peter's entire life, your entire life, up until he met Jesus, was one giant performance event. His relationships, his job, whether or not he made the team, whether or not his father loved him, it all had to do with how well Peter did at being, which is exhausting and depressing news. Which is why Peter fell in love with the good news about Jesus, how Jesus has restored your relationship that you have with God your Father, who was also your Creator. This relationship that is so fundamental to every other relationship in life, to everything you do in life. It's so key that when it's broken, all of life is off. Your marriage is off. Your parenting is off. Living under authority, especially off. Finding a truly fulfilling purpose in life, it's all off. All because we're living with our backs to God as if we're God. Acting as if we're God, thinking that we're God. Pretending that we know what is right and good. Everything goes off the rails when that's your posture. And because this relationship is broken from the time you and I pop out into this world, we go through life struggling and sensing that the life we have is missing something. It's not totally right. So we strive for success. We think that if we could just get success, then that's going to make things right. We say the right words. We try to treat people with the right behaviors, but our hearts aren't always right, and then we feel bad about that, and all because this divine relationship is broken. I just can't keep it up, and frankly, it's exhausting to try to keep it up. So sometimes I don't even try. But when I don't try, that doesn't feel right. Without Jesus in your life, life is a constant trying exercise. Friends, Jesus came to stop you from trying. He came to make your relationship with God right, to offer you grace for your mistakes and forgiveness for your disobedience, to make you right in God's eyes. Something he was able to do because he himself is God. Which brings us to this passage that Nick read for us earlier. It's the first of two passages I want to share with you this morning. It's a passage that talks about just who is Jesus. And we live now in a world, especially in our culture, and it started about 50, 60 years ago. We live in a culture where Christianity is no longer the center like it used to be. Like many of us, when we were younger, Christianity occupied a more prominent place. We now live in a country that is more Hindu than Christian. It's one nation under many gods. So this morning, I want to talk about this all-encompassing passage about Jesus from Paul's letter to the church in Colossae. It was written about 55 or so AD. Paul was a first-century church planter, a man after my own heart. He was trained, very educated man in the Jewish faith. He believed in God, but he didn't believe Jesus was God until later in life, until he was an adult, when he encountered this resurrected Jesus on a road trip. And it's always the resurrected Jesus that stumbles people. Anybody can die on a cross. Not just anybody can rise from the dead. This first passage sings about this resurrected Jesus, and let me read it for you again. The Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things. And in him all things hold together. He is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead, so that in everything he might have the supremacy. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. And we start with this passage because one cannot read it and escape who Jesus is, which is the crux of what my Uber driver, Peter, discovered, and the game changer that everyone needs to discover. Who is Jesus? Many of us here this morning, we have been called by him, baptized by him, filled by him, especially forgiven by him. Who is him? It's the firstborn of all Christians. It's the paramount question. It's life-defining, life-determining, life-deciding, life-directing, life-discovering. Who is Jesus? Especially in today's world where being a Christian means just about whatever you want it to mean. We live in a post-Christian country. We live at a time where people believe and say weird things like, I'm sending out good thoughts to the universe for you. I don't even know what that means. Is it like going up to Starlink, you know? Christianity today can mean embracing only the soft, fluffy stuff about Jesus, how he loves everyone. And wants you to just go about your life and whatever way you want, you go. Have at it. It can mean some gun-toting, vote-only Republican, make America Christian again. I'm from Texas. Conservative economic policies, kick out all the 10 million illegal immigrants. It's a black and white issue. Frankly, it's just a white issue. That's my color. Although I'm kind of peach, you know. Being Christian has become more about how you vote or who you love, or what you do or don't do, instead of whose you are and who has claimed you. Whose you are and who has claimed you. Somehow the connection between Christian and Christ got severed in our culture, perhaps because it got severed in our churches. We need to regroup on who is Jesus. And the power of the praise in Colossians 1 lies in this Greek word panta. And it means all things. All things. And whenever I'm with someone and they just wonder who is Jesus, I point them to this passage. Just read this, just a few verses. The power of the praise is panta. Who is Jesus? He's over, it says, all things. He created all things. Everything you see, he created. The technology that you and I have to create what we create, he created. And he created all things for himself. He is jealous and selfish. He existed before all things did. He's what holds all things together so that they don't go flying off willy-nilly. And as a pastor, I've seen too many homes and families go flying off willy-nilly, because he who is over all things has been replaced by the things, by the whims, the desires, the wishes. Maybe you've seen that firsthand in your own home. Or you've seen it in the homes of your kids. Who is Jesus? He is God in whom the fullness of God lives. He's the image of the invisible God. You and I were made in the image of God. He is the image of God. You and I are made to not fall far from the tree. He is the tree. He is the vine. We're just the branches. If I want to know what God looks like, how God acts, what God thinks or believes, what God would do in a particular situation or say to a particular person, I just look at Jesus. Who is Jesus? He is the one whose end game is to make right a broken world, to bring back together again all that has flown off willy-nilly to do its own thing, to put all of creation, not just you and me, all of creation, but especially you and me, especially the crown of creation, right with its Creator. And to do it all by sacrificing himself through crucifixion on a cross. To go from being the God over all things to the God dying for all things. From supremacy to sacrifice. From grandeur to gutted. Who is Jesus? He's the God in the flesh who lived and died for you and me and all of creation. And when you get to know him, he changes all things. How you live, how you spend, how you commit, how you recreate. He changes it all because it's all for him. Now that's the first passage. And it talks a lot about Jesus, but the second passage that I want to take us to also uses this word panta, but it's talking about us. It's talking about how we help people get to discover this Jesus. Written by the same Paul, but this time to a church in Corinth. Paul says, though I am free, and we love that word free here, though I am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. To the Jews, I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law, I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law, I became like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but am under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak, I became weak to win the weak. I have become panta. I have become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do all this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings. I find it interesting, divinely interesting, that Paul's key to helping people discover who is Jesus and how Jesus is over all things and has reconciled all things, the God who redeems all things, wants only good for all things, who claims lordship over all things and simultaneously is Savior of all things. I find it interesting that Paul's key to helping people discover this life-changing God of all things is for us to become all things to people, which is incredibly hard in a culture seemingly at war with Christianity. But remember, when this letter was written, Christianity was also at war with the culture. It was ostracized. It was on the outskirts. Christians were persecuted there more than you and I will likely ever be in our lives. Yet Paul says, I become like them. I get to know them. I learn what makes them tick. I embrace some of their values. I let go of some of my stuff. I learn their language, dress like them, change my football allegiance from Dallas Cowboys to Cardinals. That'd be horrible, you know. Learn how to play cricket. Dye my hair blue if I had hair, you know. I do all of this so that the gospel, the good news of Jesus, and how he loves us infinitely more than we can begin to imagine, more than a mom loves her newborn, more than a teenage girl loves her sweetheart, more than a dad loves his only daughter as he escorts her down the aisle and gives her away to this youngster who has no clue, you know? Amen. However much love you think Jesus has for you, you are so narrow-minded. You limit it to some stuff about you. And you forget all of you, your entirety, your history, every little thing about you. Your measure of love is just a little baby pinprick compared to what he really thinks about you. Why else would he die for you? And not just you, but even and especially for those who don't like you. Paul says we become like them. We talk like them. We love what they love. So that the unimaginably wide and deep and tall and thick love of God would stick to them like duct tape, and they can't get it off, not even with Goo Gone. Paul says, I become like them because this Jesus has so changed my life. And when he's changed my life, I just want people to know this. I mean, who wouldn't love Jesus if they really, really knew Jesus? And I think the exact word that Paul uses here is this word slave. He says, I become a slave to them. They become my boss. They become the one who owns me. I'm living for them to help them meet this Jesus. Frankly, they can use this building because, I don't know, I'm a slave. This is all for them. It belongs to God. It doesn't belong to me. I don't belong to me. So I'm a slave of theirs. And I love them even if they never love me back. I love them even if they never love Jesus. Because Jesus loves them. And Jesus loves me. And I love him. Again, who wouldn't love Jesus if he really met Jesus? One time in the Gospel of John, Jesus is at a well. It's the middle of the day. There's a woman there drawing water. He's not supposed to speak to women in that culture, especially strange women, but he does. But the first thing out of his mouth, he says, woman, you've had a bunch of husbands, and the guy you're living with now isn't your husband. Jesus would not make it on The View, okay? He wouldn't survive on TikTok or Twitter. Yet the woman is drawn to him, goes and tells all her friends about him, because he speaks truth in this incredibly loving, compassionate way. He doesn't hammer her with the truth, but he also doesn't sugarcoat the truth. He just wraps the truth with his sincere respect and love for her. And when he does, the clarity that he brings to life is stunning. It's like things fall off your eyes. Friends, everyone wants clarity, especially coming out of the last few years where the world just kind of fogged our mirrors and we're no longer able to see clearly, especially when it reminds us how we're not in control of very simple things in this world. And the fog clears when Jesus enters our living room and sits down in the midst of all the junk that's strewn all over our couches, and his love just kind of pushes all that out of the house. When his forgiveness and his grace, they occupy every shelf in the closet, in the pantry, in the refrigerator, in the freezer, under the nook, under the stairwell. When I pull open the attic door, forgiveness falls out all over me. When he sets me free from the brokenness that defines and binds me. You and I are obsessed with our brokenness. I mean, why else would we spend so much on gyms and medicine and counseling and supplements and diets? I'm not saying we shouldn't desire to treat this temple that God has given us as he would want us to treat it. But we spend so much time and energy trying to break away from our brokenness that when we look in the mirror anymore, all we see is brokenness. Jesus sees the original you, the one God originally created, the one he ordained and called, with all the hair you're supposed to have. That's what Paul wants people to know. His ultimate goal is not to just be all things to all people. His ultimate goal is so that some of these people might believe that Jesus is the God of all things. He's not delusional. He knows he's not going to win them all. He's been thrown out of way too many towns, but it doesn't stop him from sharing Jesus with his pickleball group or his book club. It doesn't stop him from being the likeness of the God who fills him, from letting the God who loves him have his way with him. Brothers and sisters in Jesus, we need more congregations and more communities to help people know who Jesus really is And we need people willing to become all things to them. To help that friend when he loses his way and he's out shopping for another wife while still married to a second one. Or that girlfriend who's letting guys have their way with her so that she's hoping just maybe she could hook one who really loves her. Jesus wouldn't say, "You go, girl." Or, "Dude, you need to be happy. Forget the kids and the wife." No, he'd stand in the moment. He would speak truth. He would love them, but he would not lie to them. Don't lie to them, but never stop loving them. Jesus would never stop loving them. Jesus has put a lot of whacked out people in your neighborhoods, and he's made you block captain. Because you are the whacked out of the wackiest. May Jesus continue to bless you with incredible grace and wisdom as you shepherd the people in your life, as you become all things to all people, so that they might discover and follow the God of all things. Amen. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we praise you.